Hello, good morning. Welcome to Axiom Curb Flux News. I'm PJ, and joining me this morning is Blackhole Bridger. Hello, Blackhole.
Good morning, viewers. My name's Blackout Bridger. Glad to be with you. Okay, carry it through then, PJ, and see what we can give them tonight.
That's the one.
Morning, shall I say?
Well, my first article that we're going to be discussing is from the Telegraph, and it's Ed Balls refuses to back Ed Miliband tax loophole. The Shadow Chancellor says he will look at systematic tax evasion and refuses to rule out banning deed on variation. There they both are there, as you can see. This is Ed Balls here and Ed Miliband. So,
Yeah. Ed Balls has said that he might close the tax loophole. Now, he has said might close. He's not saying he will close the tax loophole, so bear that in mind. Used by Ed Miliband, after insisting he would crack down on aggressive tax avoidance. So there again, if it's not aggressive, are they still able to tax avoid? The Shadow Chancellor failed to back the Labour's leaders over his family's use of a deed of variation, which changed his father's will posthumously to minimise the amount paid in inheritance tax. I think Ed Miliband paid all the tax that was due, said Mr. Balls during an appearance on the BBC's Andrew Marr show, refusing to comment any further. I think we need to scroll up here. Mr. Balls said he would launch a wide-ranging assessment of all tax loopholes. All tax loopholes used in the financial planning if Labour wins the general election in May. I will look at every area. The intention of Parliament must be delivered, he said. He refused to rule out including deeds of variation in this assessment. I will not turn a blind eye, insisted Mr. Balls, accusing the Conservatives of allowing rich people to avoid paying their fair share. Mr. Balls said that Labour would crack down on systematic tax evasion. However, he defended a decision by the Labour Party to accept a donation from the businessman John Mills, who gave the party 1.65 million in shares in 2013. This reduced the tax paid on the donation. Mr. Balls called this a tax efficiency and small beer compared with that the Tories are up to. Speaking to John Pienaar on BBC Radio 5 Live, he also insisted he didn't know the details of the Mills donation, and it would be wrong for me to do so because as I think it is important that I can be objective on these matters. However, he insisted that David Cameron should have carried out a more comprehensive analysis of Lord Green, the former HSBC chairman, before he was made a minister.
yeah.
Can we move forward?
We can. There we go.
Nice one. Grant Shapps, the Tory chairman, said that Labour say one thing on tax avoidance but do another. Last week, Ed Miliband criticised the practice, but today Ed Balls has admitted that the party accepts tax-efficient donations because they need the money, said Shapps.
There's a video here, so we go ahead and listen to what he's talking about, what he's got to say. Here we go.
Yes, let's build a burger.
That's the one.
People want to know that everybody plays by the same rules. Ordinary people work hard and pay their taxes, and everybody should. Now, after the last week, it was bound to be the case that there was mud thrown by the Conservatives and the newspapers. The individuals themselves have said these allegations are untrue and publicly declared, but I want to make sure everybody pays the tax that they are due, and I want to make sure that the HMRC and the Treasury has got a grip. Why, a week on, have we still not had questions to the industrial scale of HSBC tax evasion, breaking the law, and why has David Cameron and George Osborne refused to act and stayed in denial on it? I want to make sure that every Labour donation is done properly and within the rules. It would be completely inappropriate of me, the Shadow Chancellor and potential Chancellor, to go through all the details of donations and tax, because I need to know that in government, if there's any question of any tax avoidance, I can crack down objectively without fear or favour. The problem we have at the moment is a Conservative Party where they haven't acted despite the HSBC evidence of evasion, because Lord Green was already a minister and Stanley Fink was the Treasurer. I think those are the reasons why they're trying to brush this under the carpet, that they are trying to turn a blind eye. I promise Labour will not turn a blind eye to tax avoidance wherever it happens.
Oh, there you go. Wise words from Mr. Bowles there.
Yes, I would really like to see Ed play this with no fear nor favour.
I don't know why these people aren't being arrested. Blackwell, do you?
Well, they believe themselves to be above the law and they're acting as if they're above the law, and I think the law should be cracked down upon them really hard, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
Anyway, Mr. Miliband has become embroiled in a row over his inheritance because he, his mother and his brother, the former Labour MP David Miliband, agreed to change the will of his father, the Marxist Ralph Miliband, in 1994. The row centres on a house in Primrose Hill where the Milibands grew up. When he died in 1994, Ralph Miliband originally left the whole house to his wife Mariam. However, along with his mother and his brother, Mr. Miliband agreed to rewrite his father's will using a deed of variation. Instead of the family home passing simply to his mother, each brother was given 20% of the asset. In order to change a will in this way, all the people involved have to agree. The deed of variation would ultimately reduce the tax on Mrs. Miliband's estate because inheritance tax would only be paid on 60% of the asset rather than the whole value of the home. Mr. Miliband has insisted he paid capital gains tax when he sold his share of the house. The row blew up following allegations of tax evasion by HSBC customers. Mr. Miliband went on the attack, criticising the Conservatives and their dodgy donors. The former party treasurer, Lord Fink, said that he had been smeared. Although he admitted that he carried out what he called vanilla tax planning, the former Conservative Chancellor, Ken Clarke, told the Observer that his party must end its dependency on rich individuals. He said that the tax row was artificial and bogus. I think I know who's bogus here. But said that the party leaders needed to resolve issues around the party funding. I think the Conservative Party will be strengthened if it is less dependent on having to raise money from wealthy individuals. But there is no way any leader can avoid raising funds from large gatherings of that kind, said Mr. Clarke.
That's the end of that one. So there you go. Any final comments on the one in Insight?
Yeah, it's marvellous how both parties attacking each other, yet they're both on the same doggy bone.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, I'll move on to the next article. I have to zoom out a little bit there. This one is Tesco to cut up to 10,000 jobs. It's another one from the Telegraph. Thousands of staff face the axe at Tesco offices and in stores as Chief Executive Dave Lewis looks to cut costs. Alright, so let's go into how he's going to attempt to do this. Tesco employs more than 310,000 staff in the UK. So this is an article by Graham Ruddick from the Telegraph. Up to 10,000 jobs could go at Tesco as boss Dave Lewis wields the axe in an attempt to turn around Britain's biggest retailer. The scale of the job losses highlights the challenge facing the company as it tries to recover from a slump in sales and profits. Okay, so there's no thought being put into this X amount of land that they've got, what they don't do now, or, you know, just I think an article today with Asda, they've got a place and I think it's a listed building and they've not done naught with it. So
It does amaze me actually how straight away it's the workers that have to take the brunt of their savings.
Yeah. The Telegraph understands that up to 6,000 jobs will go from Tesco's head offices and 43 stores that it is closing, while the rest of the jobs are at risk from a dramatic overhaul of how the company runs its stores. So what about all these other stores, like the One Stop, which is actually owned by Tesco, just under a different name?
Is this another way of beating their workers into new contracts, which will not be as good as if the contract's that much good anyway for the workers, but this is the way to get even more out of the workers for less?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's got anything to do with the other acts that came down when people were saying, no, you're not getting no more slave labour from us. Mr. Lewis wants to remove an entire layer of management from Tesco shops. The managers affected, who work between the store manager and shop assistants, will be offered alternative roles. Alternative roles. But it is not clear.
Would that be 0-hour contracts?
But it is not clear if these will be on the same level of pay or even full-time. There you go, Paul.
Yeah.
The cuts will be compared to Mr. Lewis's overall on Unilever in the UK almost a decade ago, when he earned the name Drastic Dave for cutting hundreds of jobs and scrapping products. So he's got a name, he's got a reputation. I'm not sure if it's more well known than that, but that's the man running it.
That not be changed from what was it again? Dramatic Dave to Devastating Dave. Drastic Dave. Shouldn't it be changed to Devastating Dave?
Devastating. Well, you could do, Paul, but then again, he's a fond buyer of, devastated land. He seems to go around and buy a load of it and just leave it to rot, like some other retailers out there. Thousands of jobs have already been lost in the supermarket industry as the Big Four, Tesco, Asda, J. Sainsbury and W.M. Morrison, respond to falling profits and the growing threat of the discounters Aldi and Lidl. Asda announced 1,360 redundancies last year after shaking up its management structure, while Morrison's cuts 2,600 jobs in a similar move. Sainsbury's said in January that it would cut 500 jobs at its offices. Tesco is the biggest retailer in the country and the biggest private sector employer. It employs more than 310,000 staff across 3,330 stores. The company began consultations with staff at the end of January last month. Head office employees have been offered the chance to apply for voluntary redundancy. The final number of job losses will be determined by the result of the consultation process and whether in-store staff accept alternative roles.
It's alternative roles with double the amount of work, no doubt.
Mr. Lewis has said he wants to cut head office costs by 30% and save £250 million per year in cost across the business as Tesco looks to fund price cuts and shore up its balance sheet. Tesco will close 43 stores and its corporate headquarters in Chesham, Hertfordshire, as part of the cost-cutting drive. Clive Black, an analyst at Shore Capital, said Mr. Lewis wanted to simplify Tesco. He said the company's structure was that of a global business, which now needed to change given that Tesco has sold its businesses in the US and Japan and must focus on improving trading in the UK. He added, Tesco needs to fund material price cuts. The latest industry sales figures from Kantar showed that Tesco sales are growing in the UK for the first time in a year. However, the company has already warned that group trading profits in this financial year will not exceed 1.4 billion. 1.4 billion, down from 3.3 billion last year. And analysts have claimed Tesco is losing money in the UK at present. The company is still on the hunt for a chairman to work alongside Mr. Lewis, who replaced Philip Clark last September. Sir Richard Broadbent said he would stand down as chairman after Tesco became embroiled in an accounting scandal. The company is being investigated by the Serious Fraud Office over the £263 million black hole. Hey, black hole.
Oh, there we go.
In its accounts, while the Groceries Code Adjudicator is also examining Tesco's treatment of suppliers. John Allen, the chairman of House Builder Barrett Developments, is the hot favourite to replace Sir Richard after Sir Ian Cheshire, the former boss of DIY retailer Kingfisher, pulled out of the race. Alright, so we've got the house building development chairman coming in, I think. From Barrett. His name's John Allen. However, city sources have said that Mr. Allen is also a contender to succeed Donald Brydon as chairman of Royal Mail, throwing into doubt the prospect of him joining Tesco. Tesco declined to comment on the job loss. So there you go, say no more. Tesco. Just get rid of him, give him a good kick up arse, voluntary, and then, that's it. 10,000 jobs. So when there's no room in Tesco, where do you go? Where do these people go? Moving on. This is the Obama just signed cybersecurity executive order. It's on your Newswire, and it's a news blackout over in the United States.
And yet another executive order, yeah?
Yeah. So on Friday, President Obama signed an executive order titled Promoting Private Sector Cybersecurity Information Sharing. The aim of the order is to encourage voluntary collaboration between private corporations and government in the sharing of data about its employees, look, in order to make the world a safer place. So that's right. You're hearing it.
Yeah.
So there you go. The order was signed on Friday, just ahead of the Valentine's holiday weekend, and so far nobody in the media has commented or reported on it. The full executive order posted on whitehouse.gov reads, by the authority vested in me as President by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, it is hereby ordered as follows. Section 1 policy in order to address cyber threats to public health and safety, national security and economic security of the United States. Private companies, non-profit organizations, executive departments and agencies and other entities must be able to share information related to cybersecurity risks and incidents and collaborate to respond in as close to real time as possible.
This really worries me. Other entities. Now that can encapsulate a hell of a lot of different people in that.
Yeah.
And that's even if it's people, other entities. It could be outside forces, alien to the country.
Organizations engaged in the sharing of information related to cybersecurity risks and incidents play an invaluable role in the collective cybersecurity of the United States. The purpose of this order is to encourage the voluntary formation of such organizations, to establish mechanisms to continually improve the capabilities and functions of these organizations, and to better allow these organizations to partner with the federal government on a voluntary basis. Such information sharing must be conducted in a manner that protects the privacy and civil liberties of individuals, that preserves business confidentiality, that safeguards the information being shared, and that protects the ability of the government to detect, investigate, prevent and respond to cyber threats to the public health and safety, national security and economic security of the United States. This order builds upon the foundation established by Executive Order 13636 of February the 12th, 2013, improving critical infrastructure, cybersecurity, and Presidential Policy Directive 21 PPD 21 of February 12th, 2013. The critical infrastructure security and resilience. Policy coordinators, guidance, dispute resolution and periodic in progress reviews for the functions and programs described and assigned herein shall be provided through the integrity process established in the Presidential Policy Directive. Section 2 is the Information Sharing and Analysis Organizations. The Secretary of Homeland Security shall strongly encourage the development and formation of information sharing and analysis organizations. So it continues into the sections here. Take a further look into this if you're interested in wanting to know more about it. But basically, as there being a blackout, there's not many other sources you can actually read this stuff from. Right about now. Well, there you go.
Sorry.
No, it's alright. It's alright, you go ahead.
This corporation's confidentiality, I think he means corporation's utmost secrecy.
Well, there you go. Just pointing that one out for the audience there, the viewers who spend too much time monitoring this person. Anyway, moving on. A barman reveals the top MPs would get so drunk they couldn't speak. A former barman who worked in Westminster for years has claimed that there was an out-of-control booze culture among MPs inside the Commons. Some of the behaviour was utterly appalling and would have got a person the sack in any other workplace, he said. The Mirror reports John O'Sullivan reveals how he witnessed politicians enjoying marathon drinking sessions in the building's 8 bars while crucial votes were taking place in the chamber. The former Commons barman says some MPs were left hardly able to speak after 12-pint binges, with one member even urinating openly on some steps. Mr. Sullivan claims cocaine was found on toilet seats and cisterns. The disturbing world he describes is in stark contrast to the sanitised Inside the Commons documentary currently running on BBC Two, which depicts MPs as working hard for their constituents. Mr. O'Sullivan, 40, told the Sunday Mirror, some members would be knocking the door down 20 minutes before opening time, demanding to be served. They would be in and out all day, knocking back pint after pint. Some would regularly get through. He claims there was also a sex and drugs undercurrent to all boozing he witnessed. Some of the female MPs would guzzle 2 bottles of wine and then slope off to the sports and social bar in the hope of bedding a young, impressionable researcher, he says. It was well known that was the late night pick-up spot for anyone, male or female MPs, looking to pull. And sometimes it seemed booze wasn't the only drug of choice for drinkers in the stranger's bar. He says in the toilets outside there was even cocaine found on the top of loo seats and on the system. Mr. O'Sullivan, who now runs shops in Sussex, poured drinks for an A-list of politicians during his time there. I can read more about it, but that's the portion I'm going to be sharing with you just for now on that. Not that you really need to know about it.
It was only a year to 2 years ago they were complaining the prices in Parliament of the drinks. So I can see why now, if they're downing so much, they should limit how much they buy. You're not complaining about the prices. They're already getting it at cut price.
There you go. Okay, the final article is the fascinating truth behind all those great firewall of China headlines. So I'm just going to zoom up for the viewers there. Hopefully you can read that. There you go. That's alright there. So here's a proposition to make you choke on your granola. The only government in the world that really understands how to manage the internet is China's. And I'm not talking about the Great Firewall of China and other cliches beloved of mainstream media. No, for the avoidance of doubt, am I saying that I approve of what the Chinese regime does? I do not. It's just that I think it is better to deal with the world as it actually is, rather than as we fondly imagine it to be. This is from John Norton. Western media coverage of China is a mixture of 3 parts fantasy to 1 part misinformation. The fantasy bit has deep ideological underpinnings. It asserts that the Chinese are embarked upon a doomed enterprise to build a modern economy that is run by an authoritarian regime. The Chinese aspire to industrial greatness and see the internet, rightly, as an essential tool in this modernising project. But, being authoritarians, they fear the freedom of speech that the network enables, so they censor speech ruthlessly, devoting vast resources to the tasks, blocking access to Western media, and generally doing everything in their formidable power to keep their citizens from knowing anything that the regime does not want them to know. Hence the Great Firewall. But according to the neoliberal narrative, the Chinese experiment is doomed to fail because everybody knows that democracy and capitalism go together like love and marriage, or perhaps more accurately, like horse and cart, or cart and horse, whichever way you want to look at it. The trouble with this comforting narrative is that it is mostly baloney. I'm sure that the most foreign affairs specialists know that, and dedicated scholars such as Rebecca McKinnon and Min Zhang have been pointing out for ages that the Chinese have evolved a novel form of governance, networked authoritarianism, that appears to be working just fine. But so isn't it time that we try to understand exactly how it works? Enter Gary King, director of the Institute of Quantitative Social Science at Harvard, one of the most interesting social scientists around. In August last year, he and two colleagues published in the journal Science the results of a fascinating experiment in which they had uncovered precisely how the Chinese internet is managed by the regime. King and his colleagues had not set out to study censorship at all. They were seeking to test some computational linguistic software on what was perceived to be a particularly difficult language, Chinese. So they acquired a huge database of posts on Chinese social media. Having assembled this corpus of data, they then needed to check that the web scraping tools employed to gather the text were in fact collecting posted text, rather than, say, ads from a particular page. So they clicked on the URLs associated with a sample of post and found that some, but not all, had vanished. The pages had disappeared from cyberspace. The question then was, what was it about the disappeared posts that had led to them being censored? And at that point, the experiment became very interesting indeed. First of all, it confirmed what other researchers had found, namely that contrary to neoliberal fantasy, speech on the Chinese internet is remarkably free, vibrant and raucous. But this unruly discourse is watched by a veritable army, maybe as many as 250,000 strong, of censors, and what they are looking for is only certain kinds of free speech, specifically free speech that has the potential for engendering collective action, mobilizing folks to do something together in the offline world. Criticism of the government in social media, even vitriolic ones, are not censored, King reported, whereas any attempts to physically move people in ways not sanctioned by the government is censored. And the strange thing is that even posts that praise the government are censored if they pertain to real-world collective action events. So they call censoring, well, not censoring. I'm struggling to work out what's going on here, so I'll continue. The fact that an authoritarian regime allows vitriolic criticism of it in social media may seem paradoxical, but in fact it provides the most vivid confirmation of the subtlety of the Chinese approach to managing the net. After all, observed King, the knowledge that a local leader of government bureaucrat is engendering severe criticism, perhaps because of corruption or incompetence, is valuable information. That leader can then be replaced with someone more effective at maintaining stability, and the system can then be seen as responsive. The internet, in other words, is the information system that enables the system to keep a lid on things. Sobering thought. The paper is online and Gary King has a terrific lecture about it on YouTube. So next time you read about the Great Firewall, remember that the really interesting story is what goes on behind it. So like if you can remember the stampede several weeks ago, over in China, and I think they made out so many people had died from that, but apparently did some research and talked to a few people, and they were saying that the number was in the hundreds, or above 100 at least. But they only reported on, I think it were a third of that. So just like that, they keep a lid on things, because if it affects, the government, they have to have a government shift, and new people have to be brought in. But this article quite interesting because it covers on quite a few things from different perspectives.
So they're using the social network to what should I say, like redecorating their government.
And even compliments are getting removed.
Hmm. That seems rather strange, though, does it not?
So there you go. That's all the Flux news for today. We got any final comments, final thoughts to leave the viewers before we close this one up today?
I'd say your last article was a fascinating truth behind all those great firewalls of China headlines, but it seems to be the same with most governments. They're gleaning information from the networks to socially engineer us. So it's the same in whatever country you go to. They're going to use these social networks to glean the information from.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Okay, great stuff. It's been wonderful to have you with us, Blackwell.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And no problem at all. So do join us again. We will be back tomorrow with more Flux news for you. So stay tuned.